We're going to get started and I'll count us down. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Come in, come in. Welcome to Paul. Is this Wednesday night? This is Wednesday night.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. The week's gotten away from me.
Me too.
It's the third week of school here in North Carolina where we are. And we're overwhelmed with crazy stories. And we're going to go over just one of those crazy stories with you. Paul Rossi, I mean, you are a dissident teacher. Nearly everybody who's in our movement, we know you. You're like an OG of the movement, quite frankly. But tell us how you got into hot water.
Sure. So my story kind of came to a head in the spring of last year. I had been a private school teacher at one of the, not like the super elite school, but they're considered elite schools. I don't think they're actually quite elite as they say they are. But in New York City, and I ran into, I had been kind of vocal about some of my concerns around critical race theory praxis in my school, Grace Church School, among my colleagues, but I hadn't really taken a public stand. And in February of 2021, I did that at a Zoom meeting, which was segregated by race. It was a whites-only meeting for faculty and students together in the same Zoom. So we have about 320 people in our high school and students, and about 80 faculty or more than, plus admins more. And so I had about 200 white students and white faculty, 40, 50 white faculty in my Zoom room. And it was a meeting that was supposed to be teaching or showing the children how to cope with the pandemic. So how to handle the lack of social contact, how to stay on top of their studies, even though they were, alternating remote and in person. But what we actually got in this meeting was a facilitator, consultant who was putting up a slide that said characteristics of white supremacy, and us as white people needed to accept that as a hegemonic dominant culture, we were guilty of various sins and crimes, including individualism, objectivity, perfectionism, worship of the written word. Now, this is a very common slide. It's universal almost in every critical race theory intervention around, and it's an offshoot of critical race theory. It's something called whiteness studies, where the defects and faults of white culture are identified, and students are basically told that they have a kind of an original sin that derives from the privilege that they have supposedly as white children. And I spoke up against it. I think for me, my breaking point was objectivity. If I am a math teacher, if you come after objectivity, you are going to hear from me. And I felt that watching all of the students go through the litany of saying exactly the same sorts of things that they've been trained to say, things like, yes, I have privilege, I will do better. I realize that I have had moments of my own individuality where I'm really not thinking about the group. So everything was about undermining the confidence and the authority of the individual for these children. And I felt that they hadn't ever heard in the context of my school from an adult that could doubt this publicly, because I knew the doubts were out there. Some students had come to me privately and shared their concerns about these types of things. And so I voiced some of my doubts. I picked this moment to say, I'm not exactly sure what is particularly white about objectivity or individualism. I think these are positive things very often. These are virtues, I would say. And to attribute them to a particular race is actually, very disturbing. I think that, that actually denies marginalized communities the benefits of these virtues, and it teaches them to have a negative attitude towards things which are very often positive. And so I was told that I was but the facilitator actually welcomed these remarks.
To your
because
face.
many of the students began to voice their own doubts, and some of the teachers joined in. And so I felt like I had really sort of broken the ice, and I was told later that's exactly what happened. But as a consequence of that, the school was thrown into a real tizzy, I guess. My remarks and some of the remarks of the other teachers and students were filtered through secondhand to the attendees in the BIPOC Zoom meeting, Black or Indigenous people of color.
Yes. Okay. Explain what BIPOC
Yes.
is, because some of my listeners may not be. I mean, here in the business and in academia, we know, but what is it?
Right. And again, the jargon is one of the features. The language, the complexity of the language helped obfuscate the agenda. But BIPOC is an acronym, BIPOC, which stands for Black or Indigenous People of Color. And it is a sort of an umbrella term for Black and brown. Black and brown is a phrase you'll hear a lot. People. And so their interests are seen to be aligned or presented to be aligned along racial lines. And so they are often corralled or ghettoized in these divisive practices as you know, having shared the same experiences to some degree, they must all have the same ideas. And if they don't have the same ideas, well, then we need to show them that they should have the same ideas.
Are you suggesting there's stereotyping going on?
Exactly. So, you know, it's very similar to gender ideology in the sense that, you know, if you dress a certain way, well, then you must be a girl. If you have a certain skin color, well, then you must have this political investment, certain political views you must share. And if you don't, well, then you've simply been infected by some nefarious plot.
Yes. Well, I will tell you, when we founded this group, we had two, a Black girl, Black guy, I'm Jewish, and then a white guy. And I was at the time called an anti-Semite because I'm not supposed to be voting conservatively. And the two Black people were called white supremacists. I kid you not.
No, I'm not surprised. Your skin color is no defense against to them.
And you can't be Jewish and vote a certain way, apparently.
Right. So, you know, they have created a sort of kaleidoscopic reality, and anything that might be disconfirming evidence to their views is simply put through this machine, and out pops the conclusion, you know, that you're either a traitor to your interest group, you know, or you're aligned or an ally, and they just, you know, it's divided everybody into these buckets, and there's no way to question that. Their critical lens does not include a critical analysis of their own categorical understanding of the world. So it's really important to, and it's very easy to get caught up in it, right? Because if you say, well, you know, it's easy because they've created the incentives around interest groups. You can find your own interest group and identity politics and try to advocate for that. So yeah, it's like a trap. It's like a Chinese finger trap, if I may be allowed to.
Good way, yeah. Where, you know, it's one of those things that we used to get them as party favors, right? You put your index finger in this way, and then if you engage, here's the metaphor, if you engage, right? If you engage with this nonsense, you are married to it and there's no getting out. And that's why setting the agenda is so critically important. Setting the agenda is really super important, but you got railroaded.
Yeah, and so I had, as a consequence of this meeting, I was brought into several hour-long sessions with my administration, my assistant head of school, my head of school, the dean of faculty, the DEI czar. I had to go through and count the number of diversity, equity, and inclusion committees that exist at the school, and there are over 15, all with a population of 320 kids. So at the board level, the teacher, the faculty level, the student level, the administrative level, you know, if you count them all up, and the most powerful of them is called the Institutional Culture Committee, which is a rather funny Soviet-sounding name. And the people that run this committee or office are several DEI positions at the dean level. And they were running around like chickens with their heads cut off because I had created such consternation and such upset in the school by simply pointing out some doubts that I had about this particular Zoom training in a segregated space, which is ironically, their logic for segregating people by race is so that the people are protected from views that might harm them. But
so is this a safe space that you're talking
yes.
about?
I mean, I've spoken to many Black intellectuals who say that their worst nightmare is that white people are getting together and saying things they don't know about. So I'm not sure exactly how this is particularly helpful. But the idea was that everyone in that meeting had to continually reaffirm their adherence to this ideology. And if you didn't, or you asked questions about it or questioned the foundation of it, particularly as a faculty member, I was told that this was deeply unprofessional, that I had harmed the children that were there and the children that were not there. I had harmed the families of the people of color at our school. I had besmirched their ancestors.
Oh my God.
I was told that I had traumatized them and that I had harassed them, that my questions constituted harassment. But what I realized that during my meetings with the administration, what they wanted me to do was to say I was sorry. They wanted me to fall on my sword and say that I would do better, and I didn't. And when you don't do that, and I was very explicit, I said, I am not contrite. I am actually very happy with what I did. I think it was necessary. That was when they began to escalate their accusations, because they realized, well, he's not scared enough. He's not cowed enough. He's not contrite enough. And so we're going to have to ratchet up the accusations and I didn't. And with every accusation that they threw at me, the more convinced I got that this must have been the right thing to do, because why would anything that would provoke such an overreaction must have been necessary. I didn't need much convincing. I knew that it was important anyway. And I began to get sort of the next few months was a very interesting time, because I was going on with teaching my classes. We had half the time in person, half the time on Zoom. And as I went through my day, sometimes with very serious technical challenges, because we had a hybrid. So we all had to teach both online and in person at the same time, which is, many teachers will tell you it's a challenge. But I knew that there were children, students at the school that were supportive. But there were also my colleagues who were aligned with the ideology, were using me as a kind of object example in their classes. So they would say, well, what Mr. Rossi said was an example of white fragility. So the students, my own advisory was, kind of turned against me by the dean of the advisory.
So what we have here, I'm going to put on my psychology hat. That's called triangulation, and that's done by, in particular, narcissists, malignant narcissists, right? We all have healthy narcissism, social media narcissism, we get it, but malignant narcissists will triangulate and try to make you the enemy and set you up so that no matter what you say or do to defend yourself, you're in that Chinese finger trap. And I say this because the left has become institutional malignant narcissists. So has the far right, by the way. So we've got this point in time where, when you study psychology or sociology, we're able to now adapt, psychological malaise into groups, into a sociological form, right? And so you're finding that where you didn't just have one malignant narcissist triangulating, you had a lot of the people in the school. So this is some sort of social contagion, this fascist militant groupthink.
Mm-hmm. And what hurt me the most was that I had Black students in my class, in my classes, and I felt that, I wanted to communicate with them personally. I wanted to make myself available because I knew that they had a lot of feelings about me. I mean, many of them, I think we had a good relationship. And I reached, I made myself available. One student, was upset and ran out of my classroom. And so I reached out to them. I said, if you want to talk, I'm here. But then the DEI czars, they intervened and communicated with that student and told him, that, he shouldn't talk to me, and that. So they were really controlling all of the ways in which I could defend myself, as you say, by intermediating. And after a while, I just began to feel very isolated. So colleagues wouldn't look me in the eye. I was just sort of shut out from a lot of things. And I understood it, and I understood why. And I knew that it was going to happen. I have to say, I wasn't surprised. But in one of the conversations with my head of school, the head of the whole school, actually, he admitted it to me. He admitted that there was a demonization of white students at the school. And he used those words. I didn't put those words in his mouth. And he said that he recognized the problem, which was a first. I had had yearly conversations with this person for since 2016, where I brought up some of my concerns, and he was always a stonewall, saying, "Nope, we need to do this work. This is important work." But for the first time, he said that, and I said, "Well, thank you. And don't you think you should do something about it? If you're demonizing the students at a school that you are the head of school, isn't that something incumbent upon you to take action?" And
the buck stops somewhere, right?
I know. And he agreed with me on some other things. He agreed with me that that the school had been overrun in many ways by woke ideologues and the faculty. And I said, he said that he was going to reset the culture. They were going to have a sort of a recentering at the end of the year, where they read the speech with malice toward none of Abraham Lincoln, and somehow this was going to fix the issue. And I said, that is a nice idea, but that is it is too late for that. The school has been overrun, and they're going to turn this into, they've already turned the institution inside out. And
kind of like Oberlin,
Right, yeah, exactly. And this, what's happening at these high schools is it's slightly delayed of what happened to all the colleges. But he said he was going to put a letter in my file, and he was going to handle it, and I did. I received an official reprimand and so on. But then I had a student visit me. The student came to my office looking very furtively left and right, was very nervous. This is the only student that had reached out to me and said, I really appreciate what you did in the meeting. And he wouldn't even tell me why he was there. I had to sort of coax it out of him, because he said he was worried that his history teacher, who was a Marxist, was going to see him coming to talk to me, and that this would be used as a black mark against him.
Oh, wow.
He was checking the security cameras. He's very conscious of the fact that the school had security cameras, and that footage of him entering my office would be recorded and could be used against him. This is the teacher who he told me had reprimanded him for not agreeing with statements that capitalism was evil. And he had been held after class for a discussion, and had been told by another teacher that they would be watching him to see that he did better. So, this is the atmosphere of a $60,000 a year school, $58,000.
Wow.
In New York City. Okay, so it's not, but I did, as I found out later, there's a whole ecosystem of these elite schools where this type of culture is promulgated and has taken hold, which is leads to some of my doubts about some of the outcomes of the school choice. But maybe we could talk about that later. If there is not an authentic market of alternatives in the existing private school marketplace for certain customers, I need to be clear about that, because these are prestige addicted parents who will sacrifice
Oh yeah.
Many of them will sacrifice their child's education for social capital. I have, it's a question I'm working on, trying
Paul,
to figure out where I
I'm
stand
going to
on
do this right now.
it. Okay. Yeah.
Cover up my logo. You know, my
No,
husband and I,
I mean,
yeah, look, but your point's well taken. We took our kids back for alumni weekend last month and went to the campus, and my kids are like, I really want to go here, etc. I'm like, look, you're not doing it. This is a completely different place. You're not going to go here. I'm not going to pay for it. We're not going to apply here because I wouldn't dream of it. We're two alumni. So your point's well taken, is that, you know, now it's not that the colleges are in the universities and the Ivies are necessarily radicalized with their professors. It's the students coming in are radicalized, and there's an expectation that they, you know, continue on with that. And now we're hearing why. Now we understand, you guys, that the radicalism doesn't start in college. I want you to hear me say that again. You don't need to start looking over the kids' curriculum once they get into college. It's way before that. And I'm going to show you a story in a second and show you that. You need to be looking at this stuff now in kindergarten, Paul. I mean, is this crazy?
Yeah, there's a web. I've been compiling videos from teacher trainings that are from kindergarten or junior kindergarten on, pre-kindergarten on, where they are explicitly developing the empathy of the children in a certain direction as a type of indoctrination.
Yep.
It's funny. I had a Twitter poll I put up because I've been looking for a word that is indoctrination, but on the level of emotion. It's getting them to feel a certain way and then making that the emotional platform.
Emotional vampirism.
Yeah, that's
what it is.
Yeah. So that to me is a real form of emotional abuse, particularly when it is tied to group social identity. So your personal identity is subsumed into this group identity, which is connected to intersectionality, and that your interests as a individual are subordinate to group interests.
It's easier to control, just like we said. Black people should be doing this. Hispanics should be voting this certain way. Jews should be voting this certain way. It makes it easier for people at the top to control if you are balkanized in these various groups, and then the group will punish you if you do something. That's called something as a concept called horizontal oppression. And that means that the group self-polices, right? If you're gay, by the way, you're not supposed to be against transgender grooming. Well, guess what? Right? There are. So I want to show you this story. I mean, you paid the ultimate price. That's why I wanted to talk to you today about what happens when, you know, teachers like you say, absolutely not going for this. I mean, what you're looking at right now is the picture of a training that went on at a university here, East Carolina University. And this is a principal of an elementary school, the vice principal, and a guidance counselor. I'm going to zoom it, see if you can zoom in here. Back here, you're going to see gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, blah, 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 and then two-spirit, whatever the hell that means, right? And this, I didn't make this up. This is from the principal's post. I had fun learning about this training, right? I had a good time. It was cool. And then according to the website, this is a training opportunity for those in education fields to talk, learn, and ask questions about sexuality in a non-supportive blah, 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 so they can take it back into the classroom. Well, you look at what they're taking back to the classroom, it is asking questions about sexuality, asking questions about gender. And so this is the principal and assistant principal. So you would only imagine that you could be a teacher at this school. You could be trained secondarily by this stuff, and that you could object. Now, as I was telling you when we came on, is I have and I'm going to figure out who this is. I have a woman who lives in Farmville, where this elementary school is. Her Facebook is Nicole Miller, and she identifies herself as a school psychologist. She writes me via Messenger that I'm a psychologist, and I'm telling you, you're lying. I said, sorry about that. Tell me the exact lie, and I'll be willing to look at it. Long story short, blah, blah, blah. There's no lie. It's just, it's how you painted the program. So Paul, I put up two main things. That was the bulk of the reporting. Their picture and a quote from the training.
Yep.
And that's how it goes.
Right. And it's not, your painting it is not on the level of what they're saying. It's your feelings about it. So as we were talking before the show started, you know, if you are libs of TikTok and you simply hold up a mirror to what they're doing, but people don't like it, then you're the one that's actually painting it wrong, even though you haven't said anything different from what they're saying when you report it on what they're doing. So you know, it's not enough to actually say what's going on to be objective, and by their lights, you have to celebrate it. Your posture vis-a-vis what they're doing has to be positive. You're doing little claps, you know, you're saying all the things that validate, you know,
here's what you're saying, doing. Paul, here's what you're saying. Love wins. No, love wins. No, babe. No, babe. I'm not looking at that. Let me tell you what I'm looking at. I'm looking at this stuff on the right, which is never okay to talk or ask about, number one. Number two, this Nicole Miller, and I'll look her up after we get off of here. She said that, Sloan, you just have an agenda. Now you look at this picture and tell me who has an agenda. When you see a principal, a vice principal, and I believe it's a behavioral coach here in front of this, taking this training, of course, called Safe Zone and Love Wins. So if you don't like it, you're unsafe and you're hateful.
Right.
That's what you're looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is an agenda. And how you're right. I am libs of TikTok here. I'm reflecting what they've put out there, and I have the agenda, and I'm lying.
It's so fascinating to me how successful they've been in perverting words which have a positive valence. So love wins. But of course, what kind of love? Love in the service of what? Love, what?
Pedophilia.
So, love is not unqualified acceptance of every crazy thing that comes along. Love is sometimes actually exclusive, right? If you actually think about, you know, what does it mean to love your child? Well, you want to protect them from bad things, right? So that sometimes means drawing lines around what love should be, or how you should guide, you know, this expression of love. So, but this unqualified sort of I don't know if you pan-amorous, welcoming without any limiting
let's look at that again, guys, because I believe by the way, elementary school, I want to say it again, elementary school, pansexual, I don't know what that means, intersex, asexual, queer, trans, bisexual, lesbian, gay, two-spirit. I don't know what that means. I don't know what several of these things mean, but I do know this, and this is what I told this chick. I said, look, I said, I showed her that picture. She goes, this program does not promote sexualizing children in the classroom. I showed her that picture again, and I said, sexualizing the children right here. That's exactly what it means. And I said, not one thing on that wall is the business of any administrator of a government-run school, especially an elementary school.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. And when you think about, you know, if you talk about can I use the G word on your show? Is that acceptable?
Which
The
one?
GROOMERS.
Grooming.
Yeah, thanks.
Only if you say grooming 5 times in a row.
Grooming. I can't. It's hard to do. Grooming.
I know it is. Grooming. Oh yeah, it is, right?
One of the things about manipulative seduction in general is that you conflate actual feelings of well-being, positive feelings of well-being for another person with sexual interest. So if you can confuse those things for children in order to get them to adopt certain ideas and identities for themselves that make them vulnerable, you are grooming.
Let's look at the definition of grooming. According to the ABA, which is definitely not a right-wing organization. So let's look at what grooming is, according to ABA. Discussing sexually explicit information under the guise of education. Showing the child sexually explicit images. Adults who seem overly interested in a child or their sexuality. That's from the ABA. So
yeah,
that's grooming. Another one is being secretive and not sharing stuff with the parents. So, you know, this is not nomenclature that you and I sat here and came up with in order to be mean to the left. It's nomenclature, as you see with your own eyes, the ABA put out there. That's another thing that I'm doing that's misleading. I didn't write it. The FBI came up with that in the 70s as a part of developing a victimology profile of cult members, women, children who would be sucked into really kind of not unknowingly participating in their own victimization. These are the things that are being done. You don't do this stuff in elementary school with the parents knowing about it, because I'll bet you by damn maybe one family in a school of 300 families would be okay with this. And so therefore, ergo, you don't spend 4 hours of your Sunday voluntarily at a training with your entire staff and be very excited about it, unless you plan on doing this without the parents knowing about it. And I know this happens because we're getting call after call after call. It's only been 3 weeks of school. It's happening.
Yeah. And, you know, in the private school world, the National Association of Independent Schools have annual conferences. They have the People of Color Conference, where gender ideology is taught to thousands of teachers, and they in turn teach hundreds of kids. So you're talking about hundreds of thousands of kids that are affected. And this is not just something that the teachers sit through to check a box. They are enthusiastic. Like, I know, I've been to them. They are true believers, most of them. So, you know, you really have to be vigilant, I would say, as a parent. And unfortunately, private school contracts, particularly now, tend to be, you know, extremely strict, and that they can kick you out for any reason.
Yep.
So, you know, you really, so many parents have had to be underground and very secretive about how they relate to each other about these issues, and try to marshal some kind of defense or control, because in the end, they're just customers and they have no particular rights around being allowed to go there. Like, they pay the money to go there, and if they don't want to pay the money, there would be somebody else that will pay the money. And so, particularly with these schools with very high prestige brands, they don't
like
feel
Westminster and Buckhead. Yeah.
So, you know, like Westminster and so on. You have very often a line out the door to go to these places. Now, sometimes the board of trustees can be, a lot of them are not happy about this, but they too have reputations in their industries. Many are involved in the financial industry,
banking, right?
So they are very conscious of their reputation. If they do something that's seen as anti-woke, they feel they're going to pay a price, and they probably will. So finding schools that are board members that are willing to take a stand are it's like finding hen's teeth or needles in a haystack. But they're there, you know, but they need to be cultivated. So think of them as assets that need to be cultivated and shown that they have a duty. They have a real duty to do something about this. These are children that are being affected by it.
Yeah.
You know, many of them have joined the board simply as a sinecure or something that just makes them look good. But they may have found themselves in this situation, but they can be pushed to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, this has been a great conversation because you're getting your perspective as a teacher, and the amount of information you just gave us about, you know, school choice and private schools in particular not being a panacea. I think that's a real wake up call that we're starting to grapple with here in our state, certainly, but all across the country. You know, we've been in this, so we're fielding calls from, in particular, Buckhead. We get a lot of calls from there. And then in Charlotte, I mean, you know, we had a lawyer on a few weeks ago that is suing the most venerable private school in Charlotte, where I grew up. Never thought that would happen for, you know, kicking a family out on their asses just for having a constructive conversation, much in the way that you did. In the parents left, they thought they did great, and all of a sudden, pack your stuff and get out.
Yeah, and it's incredibly disruptive for the children. There's no consideration given.
So bad.
If you're not aligned, forget it. You're out.
Yeah, and so, and we're going to continue, you know, having these conversations because we're just now starting to get a bolus of parents on the other side of standing up, right? Who can kind of, the smoke is cleared, the fog of war is done, and they can kind of articulate like you know, when you first are in it, it's like, wow, it's almost PTSD. And so you have to kind of detox a little bit before you're able to come with it. So we're going to have these continuing conversations as we go along. I want you to tell everybody where they can find you. I mean, we're friends. I know where to find you, but
sure. Yeah. I'm available. I mean, the best way to reach me is on Twitter. I'm working on getting a website, you know, hopefully that'll come up soon. I've been writing, you can find articles I've written in the Post Millennial and in Legal Insurrection. On Twitter, my handle is Paul D. Rossi. D is in Damien. So look for me there. DMs are open. You know, if you have if you want help with something or any thoughts on something, please reach out.
Great. Well, good. All right. Well, we'll keep the conversation going on this. Thank you guys for popping into this, and yeah, we will talk to you very soon. We'll talk to you again soon, Paul. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Sloan.
Okay, great.